You usually begin with the assumption that there is an I at the center of experience. You say, I think, I decide, I am aware. This feels self-evident, almost impossible to question. Yet the moment you slow down and examine it, the certainty begins to loosen. Where exactly is this I located? Is it identical with the thoughts that appear, or is it something that observes them? If it observes them, then it cannot be the thoughts themselves. Within the first steps of this inquiry, Ibn Arabi enters as a guide rather than a mystic narrator. He does not begin by asking you to believe in hidden worlds or altered states. He asks you to examine the assumption that awareness originates from you. According to his reasoning, what you call consciousness is not produced by the individual at all. It is disclosed through the individual. The Quran provides a precise formulation for this shift in perspective. I breathed into him of my spirit. Quran 15:29. This statement does not describe a symbolic honor. It describes dependence. Breath is not owned by what receives it. It is given, sustained, and withdrawn without consultation. If awareness is breathed rather than manufactured, then the self cannot be its source. The I becomes a point of reception, not origin. You begin to see that individuality may be an effect, not a cause. And if the self is an effect, what exactly is it claiming when it says, I am? Ibn Arabi lived in 12th and 13th century Andalusia, a world saturated with competing claims about truth. Jurists defined reality through law, theologians through doctrine, philosophers through reason, and mystics through experience. Each discipline claimed authority over what it meant to exist and to know. Ibn Arabi was trained among all of them, yet he noticed a shared limitation. Knowledge increased, arguments sharpened, and classifications multiplied. But the fundamental question remained unresolved. Who is the knower? Every system explained something about the world, but none accounted for the source of awareness itself. Ibn Arabi did not reject knowledge. He questioned its finality. He observed that no matter how refined understanding became, it always stood in relation to something beyond it. The Quran articulates this hierarchy with unusual clarity. Above every possessor of knowledge is one more knowing, Quran 12:76. This is not a statement about humility alone. It is a structural claim about reality. Knowledge never terminates in the human subject. It always points beyond itself. Within this environment, Ibn Arabi reframed identity as a philosophical problem rather than a mystical puzzle. If every knower is surpassed, then the self cannot be the final seat of awareness. Identity must be provisional, not absolute. The more you know, the clearer it becomes that knowledge is happening through you, not because of you. And if that is the case, where does identity actually reside? You speak naturally of ownership. You say, my thoughts, my body, my life. These phrases appear harmless, even practical. Yet Ibn Arabi invites you to examine what they imply. Ownership suggests permanence and control. But when you look closely, neither is present. Thoughts arise without permission. Moods shift without warning. The body changes despite resistance. Even the sense of self you defend today is not identical to the one you held years ago. What you call mine is in constant motion, never secured. The Quran offers a decisive reasoning anchor here. Everything is perishing except his face. Quran 28:88. This is not a future-oriented warning. It is a present-tense description. Perishing is continuous. Nothing holds itself in being. If everything you claim is already vanishing, then ownership becomes a conceptual error. Ibn Arabi argues that misattribution is the root of confusion. You attribute continuity to what is momentary and independence to what is sustained. When you say, my life, who exactly is the owner? Is it the body, which you did not design and cannot preserve? Is it the mind, whose contents you do not fully control? Or is ownership simply a habit of language covering over dependence? As this reasoning unfolds, the sense of possession weakens. You begin to see that what you called mine was never held. It was only entrusted. And if nothing is owned, what remains of the one who claims to own? Awareness feels intimate. It seems closer than any object, closer even than thought. This intimacy often leads you to assume that awareness belongs to the self. Ibn Arabi reverses this assumption. He argues that intimacy itself is evidence of something deeper than individuality. The Quran articulates this nearness with exactness. We are nearer to him than his jugular vein. Quran 50:16. Nearness here is not spatial. It does not describe distance crossed. It describes immediacy. That which is nearer than any physical marker cannot be external to awareness itself. Ibn Arabi explains that the self is not the source of awareness, but the place where awareness becomes apparent. The I functions as a standpoint, not an origin. Awareness does not emerge from the person. The person emerges within awareness. When you observe your own experience, this becomes difficult to deny. Awareness is present before any specific thought. It remains when thoughts change. It does not fluctuate with emotion or identity, yet you rarely identify it as primary. You identify with what appears within it. If awareness is nearer than the self, then the self cannot be its owner. The self becomes a lens rather than a center. And if the nearest reality is not you, then what exactly are you referring to when you say, I am aware? At this stage, Ibn Arabi introduces a critical insight. Consciousness is not merely knowing objects. It is a mode of self-disclosure. Knowing is not something added to reality. It is how reality becomes apparent to itself. The Quran frames this recognition process succinctly. We will show them our signs on the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. Quran 41:53. The verse does not suggest that truth is absent and later imported. It suggests that truth is already present and gradually recognized. Ibn Arabi explains that what you call perception is not a neutral act. It is the real knowing itself through particular forms. Awareness is not private property. It is universal in function, though localized in appearance. This reframes consciousness entirely. You are not an isolated observer looking out at a separate world. You are a site where knowing happens. The distinction between subject and object begins to soften, not through imagination, but through logic. If awareness is one, its divisions cannot be ultimate. As you follow this reasoning, the sense of being a separate knower weakens. Knowing continues, but the one who claims it becomes less definite. Consciousness does not disappear, it clarifies. And if knowing is happening without a personal owner, then what role does the self actually play? Much of spiritual language assumes a seeker moving toward a goal. Ibn Arabi challenges this structure. If the real is already nearer than nearness, then seeking cannot be a journey towards something absent. It must be a correction of misidentification. The Quran states, "Indeed, we belong to God, and to Him we return." Quran 2:156. Belonging precedes returning. Return does not introduce a new relationship. It reveals an existing one. Ibn Arabi interprets this as the end of false attribution rather than the end of existence. As recognition deepens, the seeker begins to dissolve, not by force, but by irrelevance. There is less need to assert identity when ownership is seen as mistaken. Awareness remains, but the claim, "this is mine," no longer holds. This dissolution is often misunderstood as loss. Ibn Arabi insists it is a clarification. Nothing essential is removed. Only confusion falls away. The self is not destroyed. It is resituated. You begin to see that the seeker was never moving toward the real. The seeker was a conceptual overlay on a reality already present, and when that overlay loosens, seeking itself becomes unnecessary. What remains when there is no seeker left to advance? At the end of this inquiry, nothing dramatic occurs. There is no new object of knowledge. There is only the absence of strain. Questions do not vanish because they are answered. They vanish because they no longer apply. The Quran offers a final articulation that gathers all previous reasoning. He is the first and the last, the manifest and the hidden. Quran 57:3. This statement does not describe a sequence. It describes simultaneity. What appears and what withdraws are not two realities. Ibn Arabi's vision resolves here. Being is one, appearing as many without becoming many. Awareness is not personal, yet it is not distant. It is present without belonging. You do not conclude by claiming a new identity. You conclude by releasing the need to claim. Understanding settles into stillness because nothing is left to appropriate or reject. There is no final statement to defend, only clarity that no center was ever required. And in this clarity, inquiry rests, not because it has ended, but because it has reached what does not move.